Welcome to the Spitzen-Körper Thelema. We are in Basel, 1538. A man who has spent his entire career in deliberate exile from the universities of Europe sits down to defend himself against an enemy he has already defeated in practice but not yet in principle. His name is Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, Paracelsus, and he has just compiled 7 separate defenses of a claim so radical that it required a book-length justification, that everything inherited medicine believed about disease, its causes, and its cure was fundamentally wrong. Not incomplete. Not in need of refinement. Wrong. And that he, a Swiss-German empiricist and alchemist born in the shadow of the Alps, had not merely corrected it but replaced it with something entirely new. The septum defension sits at a hinge point in Western thought. It is not yet the Enlightenment, that philosophical revolution was still a century distant. It is not medieval either, though its enemies thought it should be. Instead, Paracelsus writes from a position almost unique in the 16th century. He has performed cures that the established medical authorities said were impossible. He has written them down. And now he must explain, to a literate public increasingly skeptical of university authority, why the old doctors were not merely wrong but systematically, almost willfully, wrong. What you will hear is the rhetorical and intellectual scaffolding of that defense. It belongs to what we might call the naturalist empiricism lineage, the same current that would eventually flow through Bacon, through the chemical revolution, and finally into modern medicine itself. But Paracelsus arrives at this position from an unexpected source, not from mathematics or mechanics, but from astrology, from alchemy, and from an almost Reformation-like certainty that direct experience of nature outranks inherited text. The passage I am about to read comes from the opening of his first 2 defenses. It is the theoretical foundation upon which everything that follows rests. Now, my reader, pay attention. If against the sophistic legion a doctrine that works sets itself, would it not be right that the work should strike the chatter to the ground? I speak, reader, to whom? To the saints who perform no signs. The gathering and concourse, that is, the coming together, could frighten many so that they would cease from stopping the babbler's mouth. But the outcome and the recourse, that is, the return, proves that nothing is to be held by the concourse. From this same source springs the error that Hippocrates must be mere chatter, and the spirit of truth in medicine must become mere babbling through these sophists. For what is there that a chattermonger has too much of? From this rabble, some have allowed themselves to be overcome by their own mouths and have defended themselves with shameful words. Because they have brought medicine into their mouths, they have had to defend themselves with the mouth, which can do nothing but shame and blaspheme. Such deceitful language has also struck against me. But it is necessary, since they are not built upon the first rock of medicine, but have seated themselves upon a kitchen rock, forgotten the truth of the medicinal art, and with their sophistic fables have carried me and others about in their masks, that I leave this not without answer. But if one were devoted to the first center, that is, ordained to it, such abusive words would not proceed from him. Their best art is their rhetoric and the fellowship of the same, and the virtue that clings to the pseudo-doctors. Therefore, reader, the answers follow upon them, so that you might understand yourself in these same matters, that is, recognize them. Although it would not be necessary to answer for the doings of such people, one could simply let them remain poetic doctors, rhetorical recipe writers, and nebulous preparers. In time one would become weary of them, but so that it be understood that a doctor without works is worth nothing, and that the work is the doctor, not the chatter. This has been done by me for instruction. Therefore, dear reader, I have also been prevented from allowing my writings to come to light. Yet I have honored Carinthia, the archduchy, with them. If it should reach you through these same praiseworthy lords, wherever in the world you receive this, without this landscape it would not come into your hands, reader. Love therefore the theory in this work, yes, love far more the works of art. Given at Sankt Vaten Carinthia on the 19th day of August in the minor number 38. The first defense of the discovery of the new medicine of Dr. Theophrastus, that I here, in this work, bring forward a new theory, also a natural philosophy, together with new reasons, which have hitherto never been held nor understood by philosophers, astronomers, or doctors. This happens for reasons of which I shall now inform you. One namely, which proves itself sufficiently, is that the old theorists have described the reasons and causes of diseases uncertainly and unjustly, and have thereby introduced such a wandering astray and confirmed it in such a manner that it has been held and esteemed as right and uncontradictable, and is so ingrained and held and maintained that no one sought anything further, or esteemed the same to be a wandering astray. This I may well make known to you, for I must judge it to be great foolishness, inasmuch as heaven continually, in the light of nature, bears and makes new ingenia, new inventions, new arts, new diseases. Should not these also count as valid? What use is the rain that fell 1,000 years ago? The use is the rain that now falls, present. What use is the sun's course of 1,000 years ago to this present year? Does not Christ say the interpretation of how we should judge this, thus speaking, it is enough that the day bear its own yoke, that is, it is spoken as much as, it is enough that you do that which this same day gives, and no further. The coming day also bears its care for itself. Now if care proceeds for itself, and each day has 12 hours, and each hour its special action, what harm is the 12th hour to the first? Or what disadvantage is the first from the 12th, when each thing is set into its own monarchy according to its time? We should care for the present and not for the past. And each monarchy is provided with perfect light of nature. And thus are the wondrous works of God, that the light of nature changes in the many monarchies between the beginning and the end of the world, something much overlooked, and action has not proceeded according to the content of these monarchies. Therefore I will, out of the power of the present light of nature and out of the predestined order of the present monarchy, in my writing be unpunished by anyone, and still less will I be touched and hindered because of the sophistry, which I call a wandering astray in medicine. Their foolishness I must lay clearly open today because of the knowledge of my ground and their erring, and the high schools shall not overturn me herein, and I give them this to understand. Medicine is a work. Because it now is a work, the work will prove its master. Now discern from the works how each part is known and judged. The work is an art. The art gives the teaching of the work, so that the art through its teaching works to make the work. Now the question is the teaching of the university doctors the art of medicine, or is mine? That will be proved by the works. Now notice what Christ brings forward in our philosophy as well and what it is necessary for us also to understand. Christ, who has not only renewed the eternal light among us mortal men, but also the natural light, when he says, false prophets and false Christs shall arise, and so forth, and shall give and do many signs. Although false doctors also perform signs, as can be found, yet they are not against right medicine. For just as Moses and the magicians stood against each other in their works, so also do the right and the false ground of medicine. If now I give my adverse party a right instruction, and to know me in the works, and the works are also found in the false, as Christ brings forward concerning prodigies and signs, then I will show you the difference therein. There would be a patient with a fever, who had his term in 12 weeks, then it would be at the end and decline, and it would happen that the patient desired to drive away this fever before his term, so he would have two kinds of doctors before him: the false and the righteous. The false one acts thus: he begins gently and slowly to cure, wastes much time with syrups, with laxatives, with purgatives and oatmeals, with barley, with gourds, with citrons, with juleps and other such rubbish, slowly, with time, and often between while Christes knows not himself what he is dealing with, and creeps along with time and with his gentle words until he comes to the term. But the righteous doctor is known thus: he divides this term into 12 parts, takes the first and the half for his work, and so forth. Further, there is yet a great lack of understanding which caused me mightily to write this work. Namely, that they say, the diseases which I describe in this work are incurable. Now behold their great foolishness. How can a doctor speak that a disease in which death is not to be healed? Only those are incurable in which death is. But so they say of gout, so of the falling sickness, and so forth. O you mad heads, who bids you speak when you can do nothing and know nothing? Why do you not consider the word of Christ, who says, "The sick need a physician"? Are not those whom you reject sick? I mean, yes. Are they now sick, as it proves itself? Do they not need a physician? Need they now a physician? Why do you then speak that there is no help for them? Therefore they need one, so that help may be given them through physicians. Why then do they say there is no help for them? Because they are born from the wandering astray of medicine, and lack of understanding is their mother who bore them. Each disease has its own medicine, for God will be seen wonderfully with the sick, as namely in the diseases of the falling sickness, in sudden stroke, in St. Vitus's dance, in all the others, not necessary here to mention. For God is he who commanded, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself," and love God before all things. If now you will love God, you must also love his work. If you will love your neighbor, you must not say, "There is no help for you." But you must say, "I cannot do it and understand it not." This truth excuses you from the curse that goes against the false ones. Thus note, that further search must be made so long until the art from which the right works proceed is found. For when Christ says, "Search the Scriptures," why will you not also say of this, "Search the natures of things"? So I will have defended myself, that I rightly bring forward a new medicine according to the present monarchy and bring it to light. And if it should further be asked, who teaches you to do this? I ask you, who teaches today's leaves and grass to grow? For he himself has said, "Come to me and learn of me, for I am mild and of humble heart." From this flows the ground of truth. What does not proceed from this is seduction. The devil is Malartifex, in whom much false signs and prodigies stick, and who does not rest, like a roaring lion pursues us, so that he has us along with him as liars. You shall not wonder that I point out and show you at the conclusion of this defense the one who said, "I am mild and of humble heart," in order to learn medicine from him who is surely a teacher of the eternal. But what is in us mortals that does not reach us and come from God? He who teaches the eternal also teaches us the mortal, for both spring from the same, although it is so that eternal teaching has spoken in words and medicine has not. But if he says, "The sick need a physician," and the physician is from God, how can the physician then not recognize him as his master, from whom indeed he is? The physician is he who represents God and stands in for him in bodily sicknesses, therefore he must have that which he can do from God. For just as medicine is not from the physician but from God, so also is the art of the physician not from the physician but from God. There are three kinds of physicians: 1, which is born from nature through the physicians of heaven in the constellated influence of conception; as also the musicians and mechanics, the rhetoricians and the arts have been born. Then there is also a kind, those are the physicians taught by men, raised in medicine and made familiar with the same, as much as it is possible for man to learn, or according as he is able. Thirdly, there is a kind which God gives, and those are the ones taught from God, as Christ says, every scribe shall be taught of God, which is as much as, what we can do, we have from God. If now medicine in threefold way shows its professors, that is, those commissioned, should one not heed whether they do not accord in their theory and reasons, in the work they all come together and at the conclusion reach one end and terminus. Nature gives its kind, according as conception has received its influence, so also man learns according to this and according as he is able, and thus God teaches as he wills. But that is the conclusion in all things, that man who will teach man must take his knowledge from God and from nature, and from the same must men learn. Whoever teaches otherwise than from this ground is, as will be treated in the next, wandering astray. The second defense, concerning the new diseases and names of the aforesaid Dr. Theophrastus, to defend and protect and shield myself in that I describe and set forth new diseases which were never before described, and also new names which were not before used but were given through me. Why does this happen? What is to be indicated through me concerning the new diseases? Mark this. I write of the mad dance which the common man calls Saint Vitus's dance, also of those who kill themselves, also of the false diseases which befall through sorcery, likewise of the possessed people. These diseases have never been described by medicine, which indeed seems to me unfair, that they should have been forgotten. But what brings and moves me to this is this, that astronomy, which has hitherto never been undertaken by physicians, teaches me to recognize such diseases. If the other physicians had been so experienced in astronomy, they would have been long before me declared and discovered at the highest. But because astronomy has been rejected by physicians, the diseases and many other things cannot be recognized nor understood with their right ground. Since now the medicine of the other writers does not flow from the spring from which medicine takes its ground, of the ground and spring of which I can boast myself, should I then not have the power to write otherwise than another writer? It is given to each one to speak, advise, and teach, but it is not given to each one to speak and teach that which has power. For you know that the evangelist also witnesses, when Christ taught, he spoke as one who has power, and not like the scribes and hypocrites. One should pay heed to such power as proves itself with works, if one will not believe the word. Therefore I expect this of myself. Just as one cannot bring forward fundamentally how something is formed that he has never seen with his own eyes, compared to him who has seen it with his own eyes, so also will such judgment become visible here between them. End verbatim excerpt. What Paracelsus is doing here is not merely proposing amendments to medical theory. He is staging a war over the source of legitimate knowledge itself. The inherited medicine of Galen and Hippocrates, the medicine taught in every university from Padua to Paris, rested on a written corpus, on reasoning from accepted authorities, on rhetoric and logical argument. It did not rest on what worked. Paracelsus inverts this entirely. For him, the work itself is the proof. A cure that happens is a cure. The theory that explains it second. The old doctors, he argues, have been so committed to their inherited texts and their sophisticated linguistic games, their sophistry, that they have become blind to the phenomena themselves. They declare diseases incurable not because the diseases cannot be healed, but because their framework has no room for healing them. This is ideology masquerading as medicine. But notice what he does not do. He does not throw out the supernatural. Instead, he integrates it. Astronomy, which we might translate here as astrology, as the doctrine of celestial influence on terrestrial bodies, becomes the missing piece. Diseases arise from celestial causes, therefore the physician must understand the heavens. The false doctors ignored this connection, and so they missed entire categories of illness: the falling sickness, St. Vitus's dance, possession, what we might now call psychiatric disorders. The threefold physician, one born to it through celestial influence, one trained by men, one taught by God directly, is Paracelsus's way of saying that legitimate medicine can come through nature, through human instruction, or through divine illumination. What matters is results. What matters is that the patient gets well. This framework would seed everything from the medical reformers of the 17th century to the emergence of empirical science itself. The irony is that Paracelsus arrives at empiricism not from skepticism about the invisible, but from an expansion of what the invisible includes. For him, the stars are not less real than herbs, they are more foundational. And any physician who ignores them is simply illiterate in the language of nature. Next, Andreas Libavius, Alchemia. The Spitzen-Körper Thelema. If this archive serves you, support it on Patreon. Link in the description.